I
We
I
didn't
actually
finish
I have
it.
a few. I have a funeral in the morning, and it's been a long few weeks, and so I was just like, you know what? I actually just you probably saw I made a gag of it right at the start of the debate. I tweeted like, "Okay, guys, let's go, time to do this thing," and then I live tweeted Josie and the Pussycats.
Yeah, no, I saw. It was amazing. It was amazing. No, and I won't even make any of this about that. So, funeral. Oh no, I know you mentioned it, but what's up there? Are you all right? Is
yeah, my wife's grandfather passed away.
Oh, so that's rough. That's
Yeah,
rough. Did you guys get a lot of good years with him, or has he been?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good.
And it's not exactly a surprise because he's been in poor health for a while. But like he's got 3 kids, and all of them are out of state except for my mother-in-law.
Oh.
And so she's the one who's been like taking care of him, and like once they put him into a nursing facility, she's the one who's been taking care of his property and all that kind of stuff.
I know that all too well.
It's been a rough little run for them, and I'm just trying to kind of be there for everybody.
Yeah. That was me. I ended up here a bunch with the family that were local for my grandma when she was getting sick because she refused to leave this house, and they obliged. It wasn't like it was a fight, right?
Right.
So that was hard. And now moving in right after that, I don't know what I was thinking. At the time, it was like, this will be great. And it has been great because I own the place now.
Yeah.
But, the first night sleeping here when she had just died like a month prior here, I'm just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
It just was, it wasn't thinking about that part till you're like alone in the house and you're just like, oh.
I ended up doing that a little bit, when my grandfather passed back in '99. I moved in with my grandmother, and part of it was that, and this always sounds like a horrible downer, so just bear in mind it was 20 years ago. And,
it's okay.
But right around the same time my grandfather passed away, a girl that I had been seeing also passed away. She was in a band, and they were driving down to New York for some show where they couldn't make enough money to stay in a hotel, so they tried to drive back at night and went off the road.
That's real.
And so it was just like, at that point, between the two of them, I was like, well, I'm done with college this semester, and left and went and stayed with my grandmother so I could help her like take care of the house and the property and all that kind of stuff, because it was a big house. It was a big chunk of property that also was entirely on hills that were like 40-degree angles. And so luckily we had like a ride-on mower, but even with a ride-on mower, like it was a pain in the ass. You had to fight the steering wheel the whole time because it was uphill no matter what you did. But I had that same kind of thing where it was just like, I went and I was helping my grandmother, so I felt good about it. But at the same time, you're just like, this is not the place I should be right now. All right. So basically, what I'm doing is, and I'm trying to get as much of this stuff as in video form as possible.
I love it. I made sure I came wearing the clothing of an expert.
Exactly. Well, part of it is I've had 2 different people who both approached me and said, hey, what do you think about making this book a documentary? And so I'm like doing as much as I can in video format to give them options if that turns out to be a thing that happens. Now, obviously, if that does turn out to be a thing that happens, I'm going to have like boilerplate, like stuff that I'll send out to people, so to have people sign and say like, no, it's fine to use my footage.
Of course. And I'll go on the record on this saying that's okay now too.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
So they hear me, but I'll sign it again too.
Yeah. And the other thing is too that I figure like, even if I don't end up doing a documentary out of it, I'm going to crowdfund the print run of the physical book. And so, I'm going to want a trailer.
Yeah.
And so, like, you figure at a bare minimum. And I have a great, and I'll share this with you, and then we can get into the actual conversation. But I have a great piece of video that is definitely going to be in the trailer. And I may have told you about this already, but I'm going to say it now. So, I'm trying to talk to a bunch of the people who have written the various, like, Josie and the Pussycats is an underappreciated masterpiece articles for the last 5 years or whatever. And, I reached out to the folks from BuzzFeed and the LA Times and all this, and there's a guy, John something, and he has a YouTube channel, and he had a review that went kind of semi-viral that was just called Josie and the Pussycats is the greatest film ever made.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, you remember this guy? So I talked to him, and while we were chatting, I can't remember exactly how it came up, but he was like, man, the fandom is something else. He's like, I would have thought that I was the biggest fan that exists out there, but I went to this fan screening in Brooklyn, and this dude showed up with wearing like the original prop ears from the movie and a du jour t-shirt, and I, like, he's getting through the sentence, and I'm like, that was me, man.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome.
Like halfway through the, like, if you think I'm crazy, you gotta talk to this guy. And I'm just like, yeah, no, that's me. Literally.
I have talked to him. I live his life every day.
Yeah. But that was fun, and I know for a fact I'm going to use that in the trailer, because that's just, and I have a still shot of me from that night with the guy who emceed the screening, because it was at Alamo, and so it was it was a special screening. This guy who does like a music themed thing, like once a month or something, and he, in addition to that, had gotten Harry and Deb to record like a quick video intro for the movie. And then while Harry and Deb were sitting there talking in the video intro, Rachel Lee Cook walks by in the background with a sign that says, like, give Rachel Lee Cook an Oscar or something like that, like doing her own makeshift subliminal messaging.
I love it.
Yeah, so that was pretty great. All right, so we should talk, because I need to sleep at some point. Because
yeah, me too.
Go
for it.
The first thing I'm asking everybody is, at what point did you become aware of kind of the existence of a Josie and the Pussycats movie?
Well, so I believe when it was being made, I was already working at Blockbuster. And so just in general, you kind of, since that was the early doldrums of the internet, the late 90s, early 2000s, unless you were that guy on Ain't It Cool, which was really the only place that we got our news at the time, that was how the people that, were sitting in their own video store going through their Video Hound guide so they could be the Video Hound guide for the people renting at their store. That's how we got our information, right? This was the same time period as we heard Peter Jackson was making a Lord of the Rings movie, and no one else understood why that was exciting other than us. And Sam Raimi is making a Spider-Man movie, and no one gets why that's exciting other than us. Mm-hmm. So this Josie and the Pussycats thing was like, okay, you had Scooby-Doo, you had, these other things that were happening, and, imagine looking back, Scooby-Doo now. Scooby-Doo written by James Gunn, man, that would get greenlit in a second, right? But, this Josie and the Pussycats thing, what had really happened with movies like that before? You ended up with stuff like the Flintstones movie and, things that were really kind of like bottom of the barrel, as far as their approach. And so I heard about this movie getting made, and it kind of just bounced off my radar as, okay, yeah, so it's going to be bad like the rest of them. And
I will say, ironically, Harry Alphont and Deb Kaplan did one of the rewrite passes on Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas, and are thus credited writers on that film.
Oh, that's funny how the thing comes full circle, huh? And again, it's an approach, right? Like those movies would have smatterings of winky, self-aware humor that was definitely for the fans, but they would usually miss it. I mean, look at like years later how badly they missed Jem and the Holograms, right? Jem and the Holograms could have been Josie and the Pussycats level if they really wanted it to be. It was primed for it, right? So I had heard about it coming out, and then it kind of just hit like a thud, when it came out in the theaters. But you started hearing from people that would come and rent in the store that would say, oh no, like this is the real deal. Like this is going to be a cult movie. And like you think then, oh, it's going to be a cult movie. What's the cult movie I've lived through since that? Like Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I was on the like bottom floor of that one. Like, yeah, let's do it. But Josie and the Pussycats, it still had the film was a mainstream thing. Mm-hmm. So people that saw movies, they didn't really have a place to share and let it go viral. Things weren't going viral in the year 2000, 2001. You know what I mean? And so you heard about it through word of mouth. And my buddy Steve, who's been on my show and who I worked with at the time, saw this thing in the theater, I think just on a date, and said, "Oh my God, this movie's the real deal. You guys have to see it." Now, we give Steve a lot of crap because Steve is not necessarily always the compass to go off of.
Yeah.
And like we all are. We all have things like Steve just unabashedly loves movies, and there's very few movies he doesn't love. You know, we give him crap. He liked the movie Bounce with Ben Affleck. You know what I mean? Like and the Dungeons and Dragons film.
Yeah.
You
we have a guy like that at comic books, so I've had these exact conversations.
Yeah, but he came and said, "No, Josie and the Pussycats is the real deal." And I wish at the time I had been less cynical, because I would have gone and seen it in the theater, because he was basically describing what, after seeing it, you know, when it came out on DVD, it's kind of like the Lego movie of its time. It kind of went, hey, we're going to be a branded corporate movie that is just ripping on branded corporate stuff for 2 hours. And you're just like, oh, all right. So you're going to sell me something by telling me that I shouldn't buy stuff. All right. And I think that's fantastic. So when it got to the store, I don't remember how many rental copies we had, but I think even the company making it understood that it was going to do better on rental than it did in the theater, because it wasn't like the 2-copy run like we would normally get. It wasn't 50 or 100, but it was always out because we were pushing it. We pushed it hard. We told everyone, you know, you got to get this. And I think we're missing that in this world, right? Like you get things like Bird Box and stuff like that shows up on Netflix without a lot of push that explodes, you know, but I don't think it's exploding the same way. An algorithm telling you should watch it is different than somebody you trust going, get out, get this. Like Josie and the Pussycats spread like the Boondock Saints. You know what I mean? It's just like, you got to get this. Look, we don't have it. You have to see this movie. And you'd get like the baby boomer folk that grew up with it going, they made a Josie and the Pussycats movie? I would have loved to have seen this. I remember people seeing it on the coming soon board and going, no way. And I think people don't impulse buy, even in 2000, didn't impulse buy at the theater as much as people expected them to. I think that's cyclic, because I think in like the late 2000s to the early 2000 to 2015s, that came back. You'd get the people that would go, oh, I'll go see anything that's an Illumination movie. You know what I mean? I'll see. And I think we lost that for a little while. I think people were less apt to just walk by and go, I'll see Josie and the Pussycats. You know, and I think that, I just think it was a really interesting time, and I loved working in the middle of it and seeing that happen, seeing a movie you just did not expect, especially like none of us saw it. Like we had this one guy going, this is great. And we go, dude, you know, you like bad Ben Affleck movies, like lay off. And then we watched it and went, oh, we get what he's talking about. Yeah. So that was my initial experience with it.
One of the things that I talk a little bit about with everybody so far is, do you think that some of the reluctance for people to be kind of casual consumers and some of the like knee-jerk mockery is just a gendered thing? Because I do think that cult film, Mo Shafiq from Mondo Records, when he was talking to Maria from Josie and the Podcats, pointed out that it took Josie 10 years to be a cult film. It took Fight Club 3 months, because we accept implicitly that Fight Club is the kind of movie that's going to be a cult film.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think Josie and the Pussycats, it had an uphill battle to fight, just as the original show, I would imagine, probably had an uphill battle to fight. I mean, I was watching a documentary recently, and it's weird that I find a parallel with this, but it went into my head. It's on Netflix. It's a documentary about Pac-Man. I think the first episode was about Pac-Man, and it said the only reason Pac-Man existed is because video game bars in Japan used to be men only. And they were starting to allow females to come, which is a weird ass thing to think about in 2020. But this was 1979, right? And he needed to make a game that Pac-Man exists because he said we need to make a game that women would like. And that seems like that doesn't make sense. But think about it. You don't kill anything. It's a happy, colorful game. You go around and eat food and all this. But that game, you know, I would never have thought of Pac-Man being a game for women. You know, everybody loves Pac-Man. You know what I mean? And so it's an interesting way of thinking that, but it's 100% true. You make a movie off of, or you make a show, let's say to start, about a male rock band, automatically that was just going to sell action figures anyway, no matter what you did. Kids were just, especially if they like solved crimes, you know, and stuff, you just move right to there. And then you make a movie 30 years later about it, that at least opening weekend is printing gold for itself.
Yeah.
Just because you're going to get the nostalgia people that show, I mean, look at Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo made a killing its opening weekend, and that movie is not good. I like that movie, but it is not good. This movie is actually good, and people were trying to...
the first... Sorry. Was it the first or the second Scooby-Doo where the twist was that Scrappy was the villain?
That was the second one.
Okay.
It was one, and again, the scripts and the problem with Scooby-Doo is that I think the people writing it wanted to make a movie like this.
Yeah.
And the people producing it were like, no. And so those were at odds with each other. This movie, somebody went, yeah, do what you want. Somehow they just let them make this movie. And again, it should have been remembered. And it's, I think you're 100% right, is I think people just think this is just going to be, you know, teen crap like Britney Spears movie. You know what I mean? People are forgetting, they're thinking it's probably not going to hit the subject matter we want, so we're going to avoid it. And they think, oh, it's just a bunch of girls. I mean, and it's weird when you find genres that are able to sidestep this. I've always been amazed that horror seems to be able to completely sidestep the misogyny there of the general movie going public. Like, what horror movies are the most well remembered? Like, you ask a teen or a person that's like, you know, was a teen in 1991. What is it? We've got Nightmare on Elm Street. They love the first one. Main character is a woman. Now, you could add that they were into the fact that a woman was in peril. That's something else particular. But Scream, you know what I mean? These things, and yet teen comedy, for some reason, it took till you get to like Clueless is like the odd movie in the rough, right? That just shouldn't have done well, but parents didn't like the way the kids talked, so everyone went and saw it. Yeah. But I think it kind of took to like Mean Girls. You know what I mean? For this genre to kind of be taken seriously again. And I think had Mean Girls come first, which Mean Girls came after Josie, right? Mean Girls was like 2005, something like that.
The thing that I'm trying to remember is whether Mean Girls came before or after Legally Blonde.
I think they were right around the same time. I think they helped each other. I think Mean Girls having Tina Fey in its stead was definitely a big help.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that was, I mean, as somebody who doesn't watch a lot of SNL, after that movie, Tina Fey was a household name to me.
Yeah.
And
it worked both ways.
It was a game changer. Yeah.
And I think if Josie had dropped after Mean Girls or after Legally Blonde, I think Josie would have been a $100 million opening weekend kind of thing. Even if it wasn't good. Like, we can leave out the fact that they actually made a good movie, you know, for a minute. But no, that's a great question. It's kind of a bummer, right? Because Fight Club is another one that I think a lot of Fight Club's cult status comes from the fact that people don't get Fight Club. Yeah. Like, and maybe that's what makes Josie better, is I think people do get it, and I think the people that wouldn't get it avoid it because they don't like what it's saying. Yeah. Which is the difference with Fight Club. People go, oh, that's saying the way I act is right? No. Yeah. That's a different thing.
You know, it's actually kind of funny because in Josie, if you remember, in the third act, just before the big concert, when you're having like the moral of the story segment from the animated series,
so good.
Alexander actually has a Fight Club line. Because Alexander is like, I'm not what I wear, and he starts stripping all his clothes off. But
I am Jack's pure, unequivocal hatred of himself. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
That's all right. God, there was something I wanted to touch on too that we had. I'll probably think of it once we start talking again. But let me talk to the big question I wanted to ask. Which is not necessarily. I mean, it is specific to Josie in terms of what we're talking about, but like. It's interesting because you mentioned Scott Pilgrim. And I view Scott Pilgrim as either the last movie that had its cult status cemented by success in the home video market, or the first movie that managed to become a cult movie without the home video market. Because it was right there on the cusp.
It really is.
But, you know, talk a little bit about the role that, like, Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and these kind of big... Not even necessarily just the big chains, but like the video industry that doesn't exist anymore would have in salvaging movies like Josie and the Pussycats or Mallrats or, whatever else.
Well, it's interesting because Blockbuster, Hollywood Video, other places like that had such a far reach. This wasn't the, mom and pop video with a person deciding what they were going to advertise, right? Blockbuster had a corporate strategy and they were owned by a production company and they had deals with production companies. So production companies in general could utilize that. This is the guy on the street. This is the movie geek in the trenches who you trust.
Yeah.
They're going to tell you to rent something. And they could use that for bad. I mean, I worked there when the first couple Transformers movies came out. They could use that for bad. Why those movies needed any more push than they already got. I mean, talk about the difference in misogyny. Everyone showed up for all of those Transformers movies. Yeah. Can't get one Josie and the Pussycats film, but you can get all those Transformers movies. But, the role that we played was, like you said, we were the street team. And this is something I think that even bands, like the internet is now their street team, right? You just would put all our stuff out for free. They learned that charging for it was actually a mistake because if people can't hear your stuff, they won't know if it's good. People aren't blindly going to live shows anymore. You know what I mean? They need that. And I think there was the same thing. A movie like this needed that street team. And Blockbuster, the good part of it was branded across the world. So you could go in there and know that in Australia, they're going to push this movie the same way you're going to push it, which means that if you like it, there's probably a guy that likes it over there just like you. And if you don't like it, corporate is going to say, hey, this movie did bad, and we know by our metric that if we get 20% more copies of it than we would have gotten if it had done, like that we would have gotten of a movie that did poorly and we just weren't going to push it. If they give you those few extra, people actually felt that supply and demand. If they saw something rented out, they remembered it and wanted to come back and rent that movie. We had so many people saying X movie must be great because you never have it.
Yeah.
And that it's the Nintendo strategy. Oh, there aren't any to buy. Which means everybody wants it. It actually works if you do it right. And Blockbuster was great at it, especially with the guaranteed in stock. We guarantee it no matter what it is, which means if we don't have it, that means we want you to have it. So you better come back. Here's that free pass. You better come back and get Josie and the Pussycats. And that role, it wasn't just that one movie. Like I said, it worked for smaller art house movies too. I remember American Beauty had the weird thing where it came out on video before the Oscars. Yeah. So Blockbuster had like 4 copies of it. But then the Oscars came and we got like a box with like 50 more copies. But we had a date, we had to wait, so we had to get that, we can't find it. It must be great. It must be great. Now again, that's a great movie. But they turned it into something more. It turned it into almost like an urban legend.
Did you guys get the cardboard oversleeves for that? Because they sent, after the Oscars, they sent the cardboard oversleeve that had the Oscar statue on it.
Yes, we did. It's one of the few times that happened. I remember on the same weekend I watched American Pie and American Beauty. And those were 2 of my first like R-rated rentals on my own. I was like 14 or 15 or 16. I don't remember years old, or whatever it was. But no, it was a really important role and we took it seriously. Like I said, we were the street team for the movie. You're the unpaid kind of, you're paid,
to be there
capacitively. Like it's not like we took it on as a personal thing. We like this movie and we're going to tell you to rent it, or we don't like this movie, but we understand a lot of people do. So we're going to make sure that we find a way to get it to you. And I think that subjectivity is lost on what you have now. The moral compass, the friend, because I rarely would steer people away from a movie if they genuinely came in looking for it. But if they asked me how it was like I had a moral and ethical thing to say, well, I really didn't like it, but a lot of people seem to. But if you like that, like Josie and the Pussycats got a lot of recommendations off of people coming in looking for newer teen comedies, and we'd say, well, we don't have that, but we have this movie. And I think this would be a great movie to watch with your teenage kids. I think you'll all get a kick out of it, and you can tell them something about your childhood because you probably watched the show. And I think that was a really important role, and it's gone. And Netflix can't do that. As much as I've fully loved streaming and everything else for just the ability of anyone to get anything. But there's no one cultivating what you watch anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we were. We cultivated things. We got things to people. And you mentioned Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim, I do agree. That movie is right on the end of it. You know what movies I think were the last to fully benefit were the Harold and Kumar films.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good...
Because those films, especially the first one, was a minor hit in the theater, but it only cost like $2 million to make. Yeah. So it's not, and, that, remember, I don't know if people remember, I just did a show on Starship Troopers recently. Mm-hmm. Harold and Kumar was literally the next thing that Neil Patrick Harris did in his post-Doogie Howser world. He was in Starship Troopers playing a space Nazi, and then, which is so not Doogie Howser, and then shows up in Harold and Kumar playing a caricature of himself, and those movies skyrocketed on the video rental word of mouth in a way that we couldn't make happen with Dude, Where's My Car from the same director. Dude, Where's My Car had a tiny little cult following, and we definitely, this movie's stupid, you should rent it and whatever, because it's fun, but it's not Harold and Kumar. Harold and Kumar is something else. Yeah. And I think they fit into the same category. I would have loved to have still been working at Blockbuster for Scott Pilgrim. That would have been a fun movie to push.
Yeah, and it's always funny. I always have those thoughts where it's just like certain things where you're like, man, that didn't do what it should have in theaters. I really wish that there was a way for me to like put it in people's hands.
Yes,
and
that's exactly it.
The video store gave you a chance to literally and physically do that.
And see, there's a difference too, right? Like a lot of movies. I guess that kind of gets done by like bargain bins at Walmart and Best Buy. Mm-hmm. But here's the problem. Your everyday, you've got collectors. Like I had friends whose fathers would just go to the bargain bin and buy everything. They didn't care what it was. And a lot of movies do make reciprocal money off bargain bins. But there's something about a rental, because a rental never changes price.
Yeah.
So you can't just walk by and think, oh, that's been here for a while and they're selling it for $3.99. It must not be good. There's never that. So that didn't happen with movies like this. So we could literally say the value of this film at $4.50 is better than the value of this film at $4.50. And people would go, oh, it's only $4.50. I'll take that bargain. I'll take that deal. Mm-hmm. Whereas, they go to a Best Buy and they see that, The Nun 3 is $2.99 in the bargain bin, and they go, yeah, I'm going to skip that one.
Yeah.
It doesn't work the same way.
Yeah, and I do think, to some extent, that Josie, prior to its kind of rise as a cult movie, it definitely was devalued by Universal, because if you try to buy it on DVD, go to Amazon, plug it in, and it's like, there's a 3-pack with Honey and Blue Crush, and then there's a 4-pack with Honey and Blue Crush and something else, and then,
Honey.
And these are all like $8 to $12 DVDs with 3 to 5 movies on them, and you're like, okay, so this is the value that you're placing on these films. So I do want to circle back just because I think you might find this interesting. You had said kind of in passing that for whatever reason, whereas the Scooby-Doo people reined in James Gunn's script, that these guys had been allowed to make the movie they wanted to make for whatever reason. And the thing of it is, the reason is 3 words long, and that can't hardly wait. Because
I didn't even put 2 and 2 together. You're right.
Yeah, Harry and Deb wrote and directed Can't Hardly Wait. That was their directorial debut.
I forgot. I love that movie.
And they made it for $3 to $4 million, and it made 60 back. And so Universal came to them about Josie. They didn't have to pitch it. And Universal was like, we want you guys. And Harry and Deb said, no, it's Josie and the Pussycats. And then they came back a little while later, and they were like, no, we really want you guys. You can do whatever you want. We just want to, use the IP. And that's how we ended up with this film.
It's so weird. I had forgotten they did Can't Hardly Wait, and now it makes complete sense.
Well, all of Du Jour is in Can't Hardly Wait.
No, I know that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? How many times have I watched Can't Hardly Wait and Josie and the Pussycats in the same sitting? You know, now I'm gonna have to. Can't Hardly Wait is a really underappreciated movie too that made a lot of money.
It
But
did, and Shout Factory just did a really nice package for its either 20th or 25th. It must have been 20th anniversary a couple of years ago.
Wow.
What I will.
Oh God.
Yeah. Well, because it was 98, so that was.
No, I know.
But yeah, that's why we ended up with the version of this film that we got, and it's funny because I have a hard time. It's in the same way that I always say, this movie starts. How could audiences? Because I know there were it wasn't just critics didn't get it, studio didn't get it. There were audiences that didn't get it.
No, not at all.
And so but I always wonder. I'm you watch this film and it's okay, so it opens with Backdoor Lover. How do you not know what's coming now? You've got to have a sense. And I feel it's the same thing with Harry and Deb, more generally with this film. It's when you're Universal, you're giving the people who wrote a Very Brady sequel the opportunity to do this weird anti-capitalist movie. How do you not know how that's going to go for you?
Oh, those Brady Bunch movies, man.
Yeah.
Those were some of the first, just to put a time and place, it not to go on a tangent, but my group of friends in 6th grade. So I was with the same group of kids, 23 of us, from kindergarten to 6th grade. Yeah. And then in 6th grade, everyone left. We all moved away. It was a weird Catholic school, but we were all very much, I will say better than that outside of there. But, we would do 10-person group movie nights at the theater because we were just old enough for our parents to start leaving us there. And those Brady Bunch movies were such a huge hit with those groups because we were the perfect age for all the sex jokes hit really, really perfect because they were actually really, those movies are a riot.
Oh yeah. That's
what's and funny then this one is so good too. And you're right, it's the same approach. It's the same approach, and why people reacted so well to that and couldn't handle that with an IP maybe they knew a little less.
I also think one of the things is that Brady had been part of the Nickelodeon lineup, because if you remember, they had bought the syndication rights for that for a while. And so it was like Get Smart and Mr. Ed, where it had a generation of fans. And Josie, the cartoon had been in syndication, but it was always in syndication in the Hanna-Barbera Power Hour on Saturday mornings, where you're going straight to little kids. Yeah. And so I think that you didn't quite cultivate an audience of people who were ready to take this movie. One of the things I found when I was digging things up was this blog post that used to be on Archie Comics' website before they changed the whole website over. And it was basically a letter from the publisher, not in so many words, but for all intents and purposes, apologizing that they made a PG-13 movie. And it was just it was one of those, don't you worry, guys, it's still a really good movie, we promise. Oh, and also, when it comes to DVD, we're going to have a family-edited version. And which again probably didn't help the box office any if people are being told no, if you're worried about your kids, wait 3 months and get the edited version at Blockbuster. But
yeah, that's a mistake.
Yeah, but that was that was what I was trying to think of earlier, was the Can't Hardly Wait connection, because as soon as you said, I don't know why this happened, I was it's because Can't Hardly Wait. And then, of course, we got talking, and I completely forgot.
No, that's fantastic. That's a tidbit I didn't know. And now, the existence of this film and the humor makes complete sense. Now that it's clear, yeah, Brady sequel, Can't Hardly Wait, these are obviously made by the same people, and they get it. They 100% knew what movie they were making here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it's such a bummer that people weren't ready for it, because it's really good. And I know that people have heard you say that enough, but it really is. And like I said, if I, as someone that was had the ability to see anything I wanted basically at the time, was still standoffish about it. That means there's something, it was just wrong place at the wrong time. Like the world and the marketing were not ready for it. How do you market an anti-marketing movie in 2001? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, and it's funny. I was talking to, I was, like I said, I live tweeted Josie instead of watching the debate. And one of the things that I did is I shared a link to a T-shirt that I had made by taking the shot of Josie, the sold out shot from in front of the burned out theater where she collapses because she trips on the platforms. And I like super saturated it and made it like kind of a cartoon thing, and I made it into a T-shirt. And I posted it during my live tweet, and Adam P. Nave is a comic book writer who I really like, was like, he just quote tweeted me, and he's like, did you take the only part of this movie that doesn't have corporate logos in it and make it a product?
You bet your ass I did.
And I was just like, well, I did that on purpose. And he's just like, are you evil?
I remember people not getting it either. Mm-hmm. I remember there being a big contingent of people going, so it's just a movie just full of corporate advertising. It's stupid. Yeah. I'm like, did you watch it? Like, did you hear the words?
Yeah. Also,
it's like someone going to the Lego Movie. It's just a movie about selling toys. Did you watch it?
Yeah. And I think one of the things too that is really interesting about that particular argument is I think it speaks to the fact that this was a movie that was marketed at a mainstream audience, but probably should have been marketed at a more indie film audience.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, you had Cumming and Parker Posey.
Imagine if this got Napoleon Dynamite money.
Oh yeah.
Like, if they had just advertised it to a different sect of people. Yeah. Because that was very close. That was within 2 or 3 years of this, right?
I think so. I think like 2004.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing about it is that if you were an indie film person or an art film person, I think that you're used to looking at film through a different lens, and you would see the hypersaturation of all of these logos, and you wouldn't immediately be like, well, this is hypocritical. They're making fun of sponsorships while they've got all these logos. You would immediately be like, oh, that's what they're doing. Right. I think that because you're used to looking at the frame in a different way, which is not something that I think a lot of people do who are just like casual audiences. I think it's more common now because I think average people are a lot more learned about how film works than they were 20 years ago.
Well, it's funny. I didn't think this would come up in my brain on an episode about Josie and the Pussycats, but I was having this conversation again back to Neil Patrick Harris with Starship Troopers about how when Starship Troopers came out, there's still a huge contingent in the world that doesn't get that it's an anti-fascism movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the people I was recording with brought up the fact that even the director said, he goes, everybody has made the movie telling you fascism is bad. He said, so I made a movie where I showed it working and showed how evil it can be when it works. Yeah. I showed the perfect, clean world that could be created and then made you as the lens of the viewer look at it and go, yeah, something's not right here. Yeah. And he said that's a ballsy move, and people came out of the movie, general audiences, not getting that it was condemning it.
Yeah.
And I guess that the same could be said here. You know, if you're not someone who's used to understanding that the art form is exactly that. It is an art form that can be manipulated to do a certain thing, and you just take what you're seeing at face value. Josie and the Pussycats is just a big corporate advertisement for, you know.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's been a fascinating. I mean, we could talk all night, and I'm sure I'll probably bug you again. One of the things I want to do is
this is great.
One of the things I want to do is actually I'm going to try to dig up any numbers that I can about the actual home video numbers and try to make some kind of. But all of that is really hard to get at right now, especially because
I bet you it made more money than Tenet. Sorry.
But
Sorry.
no worries. I like Nolan, but
Me
this whole
too.
thing has just
No,
annoyed
me
the
too.
crap out of me.
That is entirely tongue in cheek, just like,
Yeah.
oh, you guys gambled bad. That's all that really is. You guys bet all your money on the wrong horse on that one. Not the movie, just the theaters thing.
I never got how that was supposed to be the thing that was gonna like be the first big salvo. Like, to me, it's like first of all, the first big tentpole that was going to be the thing to bring people back into theaters, like, was inevitably going to underperform.
Yeah.
And I think that Tenet, like, obviously Nolan's films make money, but he hasn't made $1 billion since The Dark Knight, and I don't think that there was any chance.
He's also not untouchable. You need a company. The thing with Nolan is that Nolan is still making films.
Yeah.
First and foremost, the guy just wants to make films.
Yeah.
Yeah, they found out that he's marketable, but he's still the guy that made Memento. I mean, the fact that he can still put out Inception shows that he is way less concerned with his movies making $1 billion than he is with making movies. Yeah. That being said, production companies, if he has a couple of situations like this, are going to not want to fund them anymore. And he's not spending billions of dollars on his movies either. But the sacrificial cow really should have been a company that could afford it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The obvious one would have been like Black Widow.
Yeah, somebody that they could do a theatrical release and then 2 weeks later throw it out on streaming and just call it a day. And, get people back in theaters that were comfortable going there, but don't double down on, hey, the only way you can see this is to be unsafe.
Yeah.
Because that's what's happening in England. I was talking to some people that literally cannot watch Bill and Ted 3 because it's only playing in theaters. They can't buy it digitally and watch it because they're region coded out.
Hey.
And it's like, now granted, we fixed it. We got them a VPN and we made it work. But to me, that's, and that's not the people that made Bill and Ted's fault at that point. That's just international politics and bullshit. But with Tenet, they were doubling down on the get back in the theater. It's fine.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was the whole message.
And I'm not saying that's Nolan doing that, but he didn't say no.
Yeah, and he certainly
that's problematic.
He certainly seems to have been the one pushing, not the one pushing that, but he seems to have been very complicit in pushing that, whether it was his idea or not.
And it's very problematic because I'm still really excited to see that movie. I have found everything he has made fascinating. Mm-hmm. Even Interstellar, which it's funny how subjective I am with Interstellar, because Interstellar is a fascinating movie.
Yeah.
But Interstellar is obvious that he was not making it for himself to direct it.
Yeah.
You can tell. Like, I watched it and I went, because my brother told me right before I started, be careful because it reeks of, I have a love affair with Steven Spielberg and wanted him to direct this movie. And you can see it all over because the movie just has scenes where you'd go, man, Spielberg would have nailed this without dialogue. And the movie goes, we're going to insert exposition because we have no confidence in ourselves.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, and Inception didn't need that. Because they wrote a Chris Nolan movie.
Yeah.
And Interstellar was not a Chris Nolan movie. It was an emotion movie. Mm-hmm. And he's not good at that.
No, not at all.
And again, that's not a problem. Just don't do that if you're not good at it. That's like asking M. Night Shyamalan to not have some sort of, weird self-absorbed masturbatory thing about himself. And I love his movies, but all of them have that I'm smarter than you thing going on there that is just his key thing. And if you try to take that away from him, you end up with After Earth.
Yeah.
Which is it's finely made.
Yeah.
But if there's no movie, I don't know. It's a bummer. I did this podcast earlier today on Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I hadn't watched in a really long time. And I'm just in a very non-cynical and positive about movies that I used to not like mood.
See, it's funny. I did, prior to talking to you for the book, I had done what I guess is technically my first promotional interview for the book.
Nice.
There's a show called Beer with Geeks.
Yes, I've heard of this.
Yeah, they brought me on, and they have a thing called Hit Me With Your Best Shot, which is basically where one of the two tries to convince the other one to watch a movie that they have seen and the other person hasn't. And in this case, neither of them had seen Josie, but they were just like, well, we want you to come on and talk about the book, so why don't you come on and like try to talk us into watching the film?
Which, I mean, if there was somebody that wasn't a perfect opportunity for.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is I started describing, well, first of all, I started talking about the cartoon and about how like Valerie was the first black lead on any Saturday morning cartoon in history, blah, 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 blah. And like, before I even got to the movie, they were just like, I'm curious just on the strength of all this stuff. But then I started talking about Du Jour, and they're just like, oh man, never mind. You had me at Faison. Which actually, I don't know if you know this, on Fake Doctors, Real Friends, the podcast that Faison does with Zach Braff about Scrubs.
Yes. I had to go. Yeah, okay.
So he, a few weeks ago, there was like a whole conversation, and it started basically with Braff joking that since Donald wants to do a superhero movie, that they should do a Wonder Twins movie where the two of them are the Wonder Twins. Which, I mean, I would fucking watch in a heartbeat. But Donald doesn't want it. Donald wasn't into it because he's like, those guys are the worst superheroes ever. But
he's not wrong, but I would still watch the hell out of that movie.
Oh, absolutely. But it ended up being this, like, it evolved through them talking about all these animated series and stuff, and Braff bringing up Josie and the Pussycats, not the movie, but the animated series. And seemingly Braff momentarily forgetting that his best friend was in the feature film adaptation of this. And so Donald, apropos of nothing, just starts singing Du Jour Around the World. And does like most of the song. And then he says, that's what we should do. We should do a Du Jour reunion movie. Because like, this is the time, like, Backstreet's back together, NSYNC's back together, all these, like, Du Jour would be back together right now. And it's funny because Harry and Deb and Breckin Meyer and Seth Green had actually pitched
Breckin Meyer.
A Du Jour movie. Did you know Breckin Meyer used to be married to Deb Kaplan?
Yes.
The other fun thing that I did not know, because apparently I don't think about these things the way that I should. So Olivia Hussey wrote an autobiography. And Olivia Hussey's co-writer on her autobiography was her son, which is Alexander Martin. And I found this out when I was trying to figure out how to get a hold of Alex. And I was just like, I went to somebody, I was like, did we know that Alexander Martin is Olivia Hussey's kid? And I had forgotten who Olivia Hussey was married to because, it's not a thing that really has a huge impact on my life. And the person I said that to was like, I didn't know he was Olivia Hussey's kid, but it makes sense because I knew he was Dean Martin's grandson. I'm just like, fuck, yeah.
What a world.
Yeah, so that was... All right, I should let you go because I have to be up in like 5 hours.
Me too. I will leave you with one really funny thing because you mentioned Zach Braff. The first time I ever went to New York City, I met my cousin Jackie, who had lived there for 4 years at that point in Central Park. And she said, the coolest thing about this city is you'll go to Central Park and you'll walk by like 20 celebrities and you won't even know it. She said it just happens. And we sat down on a park bench to eat a hot dog. And I look over across the park bench straight across from us and I go, that's Zach Braff. And she's like, no, it's not. And then we're sitting there for a minute and we're both talking and she goes, no, that's Zach Braff. So we're like, well, he's just kind of chilling. Like he was literally just sitting there like enjoying the day. And we're like, we're not going to bother him. So we're sitting there talking and then he stands up and walks by and stops and looks and goes, yes, it is me. And kept walking. And I was like, all right, that's awesome.
Nice.
And we just waved and he kept going. I was like, all right, that's awesome, dude.
That's always fun. I've never heard that one about Braff before, but I feel like that's a story that I've heard a few times where it's just like you give somebody the space and they're just like, no, I'm going to come over and make my quip because you guys were cool.
Right. You guys didn't act a fool.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like it was the same way when I met, Sean Astin.
Mm-hmm.
It was a similar kind of way, you know, there's people coming up in line. He was signing his book he had written about the Lord of the Rings, and he was at the Lord of the Rings exhibit at the Museum of Science, and there was a long line, and I walked up, and I looked at him, and I just said, you know, ever since I saw the Goonies, I just always felt like, you know, you were like one of my best friends when I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like, I felt like I grew up with you, and he looked at me and he goes, you know, I'm here to talk about Lord of the Rings. He goes, so I should have he goes, thank you so much. And I happen to have, a copy of the DVD, but you know, he's like, I'm only signing my book. And I said, would you sign this for my brother? And he's like, you know what? Yes. He's like, and he was just so happy. And he goes, he talked about how he like was making an independent movie and it was going to be up on YouTube in a couple of weeks. And I'm like, oh, we made a film. And he goes, what is it? And he seemed genuinely like interested. And I'm like, this guy is so cool. And like, it just, I love interactions like that where like, I didn't like gush or like, do anything. I was just like, I genuinely just feel like, you know, in a different life, like, you know, part of my childhood, I shared it with you through this character. And I know that's it's how I felt. Like, I'd probably say the same thing to Macaulay Culkin if I ever met him.
Yeah, that's true.
Macaulay Culkin winning Twitter the other day was the best, by the way. Hey, do you all want to feel old? I'm 40. And he just fucked off after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to let you go, dude. This was a blast.
Yeah, I will say, tomorrow you should definitely listen to the Beer with Geeks episode. Because two of the things that you brought up, they brought up as well. Nice. Which is, the Scott Pilgrim connection. And the Lord of the Rings, and specifically Lord of the Rings in respect to how down to earth Sean Astin is.
Yeah, so, Sean Astin is someone that I really would just love to like have a beer with for a half an hour and talk. I wonder if Sean Astin would do a podcast. I need to see if I can make that happen. He just seems like he would be the best person to talk to.
I was so bummed that the CW didn't really shop him around the way they should have when he was on Supergirl. I really wanted to get that interview.
He was so good on that.
All right, well, I'm going to let you go, but man, thank you so much, and I'll drop you a line, and like I said, if I get to the point